I'm probably not supposed to talk about this, but I also know no one will believe it. So maybe that makes it safe. Maybe that's why it's still there. Not guarded, only ignored. Maybe that's the whole point. About 6 months ago, I was reviewing load distribution logs at the office. That's not as exciting as it sounds. Mostly you're looking at how power is being routed between substations, especially during off-peak hours to keep the grid balanced. The software does most of it, but anomalies still come up. Sometimes it's a bad sensor, and sometimes theft, and sometimes just weather. But there was one reading I couldn't make sense of. It was a slow, steady draw about 900 kilowatts, coming from a decommissioned hydroelectric plant about 40 miles out of town. Not surging or fluctuating, but constant. Like someone had hooked up a warehouse of servers to a waterfall and walked away. I did the math. 900 kilowatts steady. That's not some guy who learned how to hack the power system and is now getting free juice. That's enough power to run maybe 800 homes at once. Or a server farm, the kind that handles surveillance or autonomous weapons testing. Maybe a cold storage unit for something that needs to stay under 100 Kelvin. We're talking some serious power. But we didn't have any records of that kind of infrastructure. Not on paper, not on the load balance sheet, and certainly not in a plant that's supposed to be stone dead. The weird thing was that plant had been shut down for over a decade. It was supposed to be drained and offline. We'd removed it from routing long ago. There wasn't even supposed to be voltage running to that area anymore. So I flagged it in our system and sent a request to facilities management to investigate. A few days later, I got a short reply. It said, "Logged, no further action necessary." That was it. No ticket, no field assignment. Not even a note in the system. Simply closed. But every week when I checked our maintenance dashboards, that same draw was still active. Always 900 kilowatts. Always too smooth to be incidental. That's not something caused by a faulty meter. You don't get a decade-long phantom load on a retired system by mistake. I let it go for a bit. I really did. I told myself it was above my pay grade. Maybe some rural facility leased the property and no one updated the paperwork. But it gnawed at me. It's not just that it was wrong. It was that nobody wanted to look into it. That silence was louder than any red flag. So one Saturday I drove out there. The access road was still intact, though overgrown. No signs, no warnings, no vehicles parked nearby. You'd think it hadn't been touched in years. But when I reached the gate, the padlock was new. Stainless steel, no rust. And the chain had been looped twice. Once in the usual way and once through the back fencing like someone was really trying to keep people out. I parked my truck down the slope and hiked in the rest of the way. Just me, a backpack, and a handheld voltage detector. If someone stopped me, I figured I'd just flash my employee badge and say I was doing a follow-up from an old work order. The front door of the plant building was closed but not locked. I pushed it open and the smell hit me first. It wasn't rot or mildew. Simply stale concrete, rust, and something else underneath. Not chemical exactly, more like mechanical heat. Like warm metal in a sealed box. The lights were off, of course, but my flashlight caught the old turbines and control panels still sitting like museum pieces. Except one of them, a large control cabinet with cooling fins, was humming. It was that low electric whine of something under load. I ran the voltage wand along the floor cables and watched it light up like a Christmas tree. I went deeper into the facility. The auxiliary room with the control breakers had a modern panel installed, much newer than the building itself. I checked the labels. They were generic. Main 1, auxiliary, trunk A. No company names, no unit numbers. Just stripped down industrial grade controls with no markings. And every single breaker was live. There was no phone reception inside, so I couldn't send coordinates, and I wasn't about to start poking around wiring I didn't understand. But I opened one of the cabinet panels and saw something that stopped me. A paper tag. It was hanging off of one of the terminal bundles by a zip tie, like someone had intended to remove it later but never did. It said, "Monitoring in progress, do not alter circuit." And underneath, in handwriting, "Site load stabilized, maintain until further instruction." No company name, no phone number, nothing to trace. I left everything as it was and made my way out. On the way back to my truck, I noticed something else. Tire tracks in the grass, deep ones and recent. Whatever was happening there, someone was coming back regularly, and they didn't want attention. Back at work on Monday, I pulled up our records again and tried to trace any work orders, equipment transfers, anything that might explain the modern control panel. I didn't find anything. The property still showed as decommissioned. I asked around casually, and nobody knew of any third-party contracts in that area. No military involvement and no leases. I tried submitting another report. This time I attached voltage logs, satellite photos, even a write-up of my visit. A day later, it was marked as duplicate and auto-closed. But the draw kept showing up, still 900 kilowatts, like a heartbeat. That was 4 months ago. I haven't been back since. Not because I'm scared of what I'll find, but because of something that happened last week. I came into the office early, just before sunrise, and found something taped to my locker. It was a lockout tag just like the ones we use in the field. Yellow, laminated, zip-tied through the handle. But this one had no name, no department. Just a single line handwritten in permanent marker. It said, "Stay out of closed circuits." That's all. No one said anything. There's been no reprimand and no follow-up. I'm still on the schedule, still getting my paychecks. But I haven't checked that load reading again. I don't even go near that part of the dashboard anymore. Whoever's drawing power from that dead station, they know I saw it. And as long as I don't ask questions, I get to keep pretending it never happened. That wraps up our first story. I'm thinking some serious Black Ops military stuff is going on. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, take this time to hit the like and subscribe button. If you have a true scary story you'd like to share, the links to send them to are up on the screen. This will be our only break, so let's get back to the rest of the stories. I've been flying drones for a few years now, mostly as a hobby, capturing footage of abandoned places or landscapes around town. Nothing fancy, I have a decent mid-range drone with a good camera. I like the challenge of finding spots no one expects to see. One Saturday afternoon, I was flying over a cleared lot on the edge of town. The building that used to be there had been demolished maybe a year ago, but the land was still bare dirt and gravel. I was capturing slow, sweeping shots to put together a little video for my channel. As I reviewed the live feed on my controller, something caught my eye. The ground wasn't just flat and boring. It had faint, irregular patterns, almost like a grid but not quite symmetrical. It looked like a shadow, but the sun was straight overhead, so the angles didn't match up. Curious, I hovered closer, zoomed in. The camera picked up what looked like long rectangular shapes beneath the surface, like outlines pressed into the earth. I thought maybe it was the foundation remains of the old building, but the shapes were too precise, and they didn't match any old photos I had seen of the place. I decided to come back later with a shovel. The next morning, I parked near the lot, pulled on boots, and took a closer look. The dirt was loose in places like someone had dug and filled recently, but there were no fresh tire tracks or footprints except mine. It was eerily quiet with only the hum of distant traffic. I started digging near one of the grid edges the drone had captured. The soil was soft, almost unnaturally so, as if it had been disturbed or layered. After about 15 minutes, my shovel hit metal. I cleared the dirt away and uncovered what looked like the edge of a large rusted hatch. It was about the size of a basement door, built into the ground with a heavy handle. I tugged on it, but it was stuck tight. It wasn't locked because the handle moved freely. More like dirt and rust had jammed it shut. I took a step back and looked around. The lot was empty except for me, but a feeling hit me, like I was being watched or that someone didn't want this found. I went back to my car, and after a moment, I found a crowbar in the trunk. It wasn't pretty, but it was enough leverage. With a grunt, I forced the hatch open, and a cold rush of stale air hit me. The stairwell leading down was narrow, concrete, and surprisingly clean. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and old plastic, like a place that had been kept tidy despite abandonment. I pulled out my flashlight and headed down. About 20 feet below, the stairwell opened into a brightly lit corridor, lined with pastel-painted walls, and framed children's drawing taped unevenly along the wall. The fluorescent bulbs flickered softly, but the place felt lived in. I stepped in deeper and saw tiny tables and chairs neatly arranged, shelves stocked with toys, puzzles, and books, cubbies with backpacks and jackets. There was no dust, no cobwebs, but I found a calendar on the wall turned to this month, with days crossed off in thick marker. There were notes about snack time, naps, and even a field trip planned. But here's the kicker. I checked every city record, every zoning permit for the area. There was no daycare listed here, no record of a business or any facility operating underground. No one knew about this place. I kept walking. My mouth was dry with anxiety. If someone came back and shut the hatch, I'd be locked in here for good. Down one hallway, I found a room with cots neatly made, but with no one inside. There was a small kitchen stocked with food, unopened cartons, fresh fruit. Everything looked normal, like this place was waiting for children to come back, but no one ever did. I left after an hour, shut the hatch, and tamped down the dirt as best I could. I haven't told anyone. I don't want people poking around. Sometimes at night, I think about those tiny chairs and the notes on the wall. With all the strange stuff going on in the world, I think I'm going to let the authorities know about that place. I hope it isn't what I think it is. I live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing really happens unless someone forgets trash day or a tree branch falls across the road. That's why it stood out when I started noticing things over at the old middle school. It's been shut down for over 10 years. District consolidations, budget cuts, you know, the usual. They fenced it off, slapped a few no trespassing signs on the front doors, and let nature take its course. Graffiti came and went. A few teens tried to make it their hangout spot, but eventually even they stopped showing up. It's just a hollow brick shell taking up space now. But over the last couple of months, things have changed. I walk my dog late at night, sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., because I work evenings and she's a nervous mutt who needs quiet. That's when I first saw the truck. No markings, just a box truck, matte gray, pulled around back where the cafeteria used to be. The first time I saw it, I figured someone was scrapping copper or maybe cleaning it out before demolition. But then I saw it again and again, always around the same time, always with the lights off until it turned the corner. After the third sighting, I started slowing my pace near the alley behind the school, just enough to get a good look without looking too obvious. One night I saw a guy in a dark hoodie unlock the rear doors of the truck and carry something heavy inside. It was a single black crate, plastic and industrial without a label. He did it quickly, like he'd done it 100 times before. The weirdest part was there was a light on in the basement, a soft, cold fluorescent glow bleeding through one of the old window wells. The entire building's supposed to be disconnected. No gas, no electricity. But there it was, a steady buzz of life under a corpse of a school. That was last week. I told myself to mind my business, and for a few days I did. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. There's no school board label on the trucks, no mention of renovations on the city website, no permit signs, and the fence has brand new padlocks. Someone cares about keeping people out. This morning I couldn't help myself. I went over just after sunrise. It was a quiet Sunday. I slipped through a section of the chain link fence where the ties had been clipped. Not by me. Someone else had already found their way in. I guess I was just the next curious idiot. The building smells like mildew and dust, with that stale, too quiet kind of silence. I crept through the back corridor where the janitor's closet used to be. The light was better now, and I noticed fresh footprints on the tile. Someone had been in the building recently. I could tell because there were no dust scuffs, just heel marks and compressed grit. I found the stairs to the basement propped open with a small stone. I crept downstairs with my ears straining. I didn't hear anything, but there was that electrical hum again. It was steady and real. The basement halls were clean, not new clean, but cleared and organized. And at the far end of one hallway, tucked behind the old boiler room, was a door I didn't remember from when I was a student. It was steel, new with no rust, and next to it, flush in the concrete wall, was a keycard reader. That's when I noticed the camera above it, tiny but active. The lens shifted when I moved. It followed me. There was no blinking light, no logo, just this matte black eye trained right at my face. Instinctively, I covered my eyes. I took a slow step back. I didn't turn around until I was halfway down the hall again. Whoever set this up, they didn't want company, but they expected someone might come nosing around. That door wasn't meant to keep kids out. That was professional security. As I passed the janitor's closet again, I spotted something I had missed the first time. It looked like there was another door hidden in the wall. I could see places in the tile that didn't line up. There was no doorknob, but it was rectangle like a door would be. My guess is it's exit only. For what reason, I don't know. I haven't been back since. No one's come knocking, no black vans, no threatening calls. But the lights are still on in the basement. The truck still shows up sometimes. And sometimes when I walk my dog past the alley, I catch the faintest sound of something. Maybe an elevator, maybe a fan, humming deep under the school. Something's going on down there. And the worst part is, I don't think I want to know what. I work maintenance for a hospital that we'll call St. Luke's. It's one of those aging concrete boxes built in the 50s and patched together ever since. I've been there 12 years, long enough to know which hallways echo too much, which doors swell in the summer, which staff sneak off to the roof for a smoke break. In other words, long enough to know the guts of the place. A few weeks ago, we got reports of water pressure dropping in the north wing. That's the old ICU that's barely used now. I ran diagnostics and narrowed it down to a likely leak between the sub-basement level and the service corridor. Weird thing was, the pressure kept fluctuating like the leak was moving. Water doesn't move like that unless it's following gravity. So I went down to the service level with a flashlight, pipe wrench, and a few fittings in my bag. The floor down there is poured concrete, over raised channels for utility lines. When I walked toward the old burn unit, I heard water, flowing but muffled, like it was beneath me. I tapped the floor with my wrench and heard it. It was hollow. That didn't make sense. There shouldn't be a void under that part of the hospital. I pried open one of the raised floor panels. Underneath was an access hatch I'd never seen before. Looked old but recently used. No dust, no rust on the latch. I radioed my supervisor and said I'd be running diagnostics a little longer than expected. He simply grunted. That was all the clearance I needed. I dropped down into a tunnel, maybe 6 feet high, with smooth poured walls and low LEDs running along the base. The lights worked but flickered like they hadn't been serviced in a while. Still, someone had wired them into the grid. It looked like a service tunnel, but not one I'd ever seen in the hospital before. There were old storage shelves along the walls at first, retired EKG machines, rusting stretchers, a few boxes marked in faded Sharpie, OBGYN, Pediatrics 94 through 98. Some of the stuff still had barcodes on it, but the further I went, the cleaner it got. I came to a door. Not one of those steel hospital swing doors. This was solid, industrial grade. Looked new. I pushed it open expecting another corridor, maybe an old records room. Instead, I stepped into a pristine operating room. Fluorescents buzzed overhead. The walls were surgical white. The OR table was spotless, raised with arm boards extended. There was a Da Vinci robotic surgical system in the corner, top of the line. That model wasn't even in our main OR yet. There was also an anesthesia cart, a vital monitor powered on. Every drawer was stocked. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt ready to be used. I backed out. I should have turned around then. But something about how carefully everything was arranged. I had to see more. Another 100 feet down the tunnel, I found what looked like a post-op recovery room. There were 4 beds, brand new linens, pillows fluffed. One bed had a fresh vase of daisies on the nightstand, like someone was expected to wake up there. There was no dust. The HVAC was running. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something floral. I stood there for a long time taking it all in, my mind racing with thoughts of what that place could be used for. Eventually, I forced myself to leave. The tunnel gave me a bad feeling I couldn't shake. I felt like I was walking through something I shouldn't have seen, like trespassing in a house that wasn't empty. The next day, I tried to pull schematics to see what the hell that section was. There's no record. I went to physical archives. There was nothing there. I even asked the old-timers, the guys who've been here 30 or 40 years. They just shook their head. One of them, Carl, gave me a look, the kind that says stop asking questions if you know what's good for you. I haven't gone back down. I marked the floor tile I lifted with a tiny X under the trim, just in case. But I avoid that wing now. I feign busyness when assignments come in near it. Last week, I checked the pressure logs again. Readings are now normal. But there's now a steady low-level power draw on an internal circuit I can't trace. I know it's coming from somewhere down there, and I'm not chasing it this time. I don't want to go down there again. I was working a campus work-study job for Dr. Keene, not his real name for obvious reasons, but he's one of the senior chemistry professors at the university. He was the sort of academic who wore bow ties without irony, and never used email if he could help it. My job mostly consisted of running errands, printing out journal articles, filling equipment orders, and fetching boxes from the archives. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked being close to the labs. That day, he sent me to retrieve a piece of older equipment, something he'd loaned out to another department a few years back, and now wanted returned. All I had was a vague description: an old humidifier unit, big, metal, should have a red tag on it. He gave me a key to the old wing of the science building, the original structure built back in the 1940s. Most classes had moved to the newer buildings across the quad, but part of the old wing was still used for storage. The lights were dim, a few fixtures flickering overhead as I stepped past dusty bulletin boards and locked up offices that hadn't seen a student in years. Everything smelled like paper and mildew. The storage room was behind a warped wooden door near the back. Inside, there were rows of rusted shelves and cardboard boxes sagging under their own weight. I spent about 20 minutes looking through dusty labeling before I found the thing Dr. Keene wanted, buried under a pile of chemistry textbooks and half-rotted extension cords. I was hauling the unit toward the door when I noticed the stack of boxes by the far wall. They were heavy-looking, marked with the university's inventory stickers, but they'd clearly been moved recently. The dust around them was disturbed. The floor beneath had clean scuff marks as if something had rolled across it. Behind the boxes there was a metal door, the kind you see in freight elevators. It was partially open. I stopped and looked at it quizzically. We're a small university. No other building on campus has a basement floor, but this door had a call button, complete with an old glowing bulb that still lit up when I pressed it. The metal gate slid open with a reluctant groan, revealing a small, boxy elevator car. It looked old, definitely original to the building, but it was operational. I didn't go down that day. I told myself I was just being nosy. I pushed the boxes back into place, locked up the storage room, and went on with my shift. But that night, I kept thinking about it. Why was there an elevator still being used in a seal-off wing of the university? Who had moved those boxes? I came back after hours the next evening. My key still worked. I brought a flashlight this time. The elevator was right where I left it, and when I pressed the button, it hummed to life and descended slowly into the floor. There were no floor numbers, just an old-style up-down toggle and a red stop button. I braced myself and wrote it down. It took longer than I expected, maybe 20 seconds, maybe more. When it finally stopped, the door slid open into a white hallway. This part was nothing like upstairs. The floors were polished linoleum. The walls were clean and pale green. The air smelled faintly sterile, like alcohol wipes and new paint. I expected old piping or forgotten records, but this was active. There were doors on either side of the corridor. Some were locked with keypad readers and others had small square windows. Through one of the windows, I saw what looked like a clean room, a full containment suite. Stainless steel benches, sealed cabinets, and rows of incubators. I recognized some of the equipment: laminar flow hoods, autoclaves, viral sample storage. There were animal cages too, mice maybe, or something smaller. No signs of life, but everything was in order, tagged, labeled, and clean, like it was in use. I kept going down the hall until I reached a glass partition. On the other side was a small lab, computer monitors, a cryogenic freezer, and something that looked like a spectrophotometer. I stood there for a few minutes just looking around. Then the elevator dinged behind me. I almost screamed, but no one stepped out. I had hit the call button to keep the car open when I first got down there, but I guess it timed out. The doors closed and reopened on their own, announcing their presence like a polite ghost. That was enough for me. I turned and walked back to the elevator. I kept telling myself it was just some obscure research grant, a satellite lab, maybe a privately funded virology project that the public campus wasn't involved in. But I'm a chemistry major and I know this university. There are no virology programs here, no active grants for biological containment studies, nothing that would explain what I saw. The next morning, I went back to work like nothing had happened. Later that day, I casually asked Dr. Keene if the university ever dabbled in biohazard research. He frowned and shook his head. No, not our field, he said. Closest we get to that is our mold studies on spoiled grain. That was it. I never mentioned the elevator, never went back to that part of the building. I'd like to say I did more digging or filed some anonymous report, but the truth is, I didn't want to know more. Because whatever's going on under this university, whatever this place is for, it's not for students like me. And someone made sure it stayed hidden. Even now, I wonder how many people know about it, or how many of us have been down there, curious like me, and decided it was better not to ask questions. I wasn't planning on going off trail that day. I know better. State park rules exist for a reason, and I've always been the kind of guy who brings extra socks, logs his route, texts someone before stepping off cell coverage. I'm not reckless. But somewhere past mile marker 9, I saw a break in the brush that didn't look natural. No posted signs, no obvious trailhead, just a subtle dip in the tree line and a strip of dirt that looked like it had been walked once or twice. I don't know what made me turn. I wasn't tired, wasn't curious. I simply veered left and started walking. It was quiet in that patch of woods, even quieter than usual. I've hiked in places where you hear your own heartbeat, and this felt even thinner. I walked maybe 10 minutes before I found it. The cabin was set in a small clearing, like something out of a hunting magazine from the 50s. Sagging roof, busted window shutters, moss curling up the siding like ivy. At first I figured it was some long-forgotten shack. But then I noticed there were no paths leading to it. No tire tracks, no footprints. And the clearing was too neat, like someone had made sure the grass didn't grow too wild around it. The door wasn't locked, only stuck. I should have turned around, but I didn't. Inside it smelled like dust and cedar and something faintly chemical. The furniture was bare. There was only a bench and a broken table, and the place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, except for the door. Set into the far wall, low to the floor, was a metal hatch, heavy steel, clean edges, no rust. It looked like it had been installed last week, and right beside it, a small black panel with a card reader. I remember standing there for a second, trying to make sense of it. The door didn't belong. It was like someone had built a bunker entrance into a stage set. Out of curiosity, I knelt down, pressed my hand against the door. It was cold and I could hear something faint, like a fan running behind it. There was airflow too, a small draft coming through the seam. I didn't try to open it. There wasn't a handle, just the reader and a small seam down the middle. No labels, no manufacturer marks, nothing. I stood up and backed away, and that's when I got the feeling. You know when you know someone's just watching you? Not paranoia, but instinct. That kicked in hard. I turned around, looked out the broken cabin window. There was nothing but trees and stillness, but it didn't feel right anymore. I left the cabin and started back the way I came, but almost immediately I heard movement behind me. Not footsteps, but just the snap of a branch, a soft shift of weight on dry ground. At first I thought maybe I spooked a deer. Then I heard it again, closer this time, and then again off to my left. I picked up the pace, tried not to break into a run, but I was scanning hard now, watching for movement in the trees. I caught flashes of color a few times, fabric maybe, or just shadows moving the wrong way. Once I swear I saw a glint like a lens catching sunlight. I told myself I was imagining it, that I'd gotten too far off trail and was just spooking myself. But when I finally saw the familiar tree line again, something made me stop. Up in the branches of a pine tree, maybe 10 feet above my head, was a small camera, black, camouflaged. It was pointed toward the trail I had just come out of. I stood there a moment too long enough to wonder if it was still alive, if someone was watching, if they'd already seen me inside the cabin. Then I turned and walked all the way back to the main path. I didn't stop again until I reached my car. I haven't told anyone until now. Part of me thinks maybe I imagined it, that it was some private wildlife research site or ranger facility no one bothered to tear down. But the door was too new. The camera was too well hidden, and that feeling of being watched didn't go away for days. Whatever that cabin was, I don't think I was supposed to see it, and I sure as hell wasn't supposed to go near it. I haven't been back to that park since. You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radeon production brought to you by Spoopy Cola.